Welcome to AM Best Audio.
As agency workflows become more digital and time-sensitive, expectations around carrier connectivity are rising fast. Agents are increasingly favoring partners that offer real-time insight, streamlined submissions, and products aligned with today's risks, according to Ivan's latest connectivity report. These shifting priorities signal a broader transformation in distribution, one where speed, clarity, and data driven decision making are redefining what it means to be a carrier of choice. I'm Lori Chortis for AM Best Audio, and joining us now to discuss that and other key insights from the report is Ivan's president, Michael Streit. Michael, welcome. So great to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to speak with you, Lori. Thank you for having me.
Michael, can you tell us about some of the key findings from the report and what they reveal about how agency expectations are changing today?
Absolutely. As you know, we run this survey every year, and there's always a consistent theme. First of all, carriers want nothing more than to get as close to their distribution partners as possible because they know that brokers and agents place business with carriers that make it easy, that remove friction. And so the results of the survey this year reinforce that, but they also reflect the changing landscape that you described. One of the ways that reflects the changing landscape is that for the first time, real-time appetite information is the top factor agencies use when choosing carrier partners. That's a big shift, and it makes a lot of intuitive sense. You can imagine the frustration for an agent trying to place risk with a carrier who they believe has appetite, but the appetite has changed and they haven't kept the agent in the loop on that. The second thing that came through loud and clear is that commercial submissions remain the single biggest friction point. 72% of our agency survey respondents called for more automation in that workflow. And agencies are just less and less willing to absorb manual work when placing commercial business.
Michael, what did effective agency carrier connectivity look like in 2025? And how can carriers today build seamless partnerships that reduce friction in workflows like quoting, submissions, and servicing?
I think we talk a lot at Applied about the digital round trip of insurance that begins with the insured, goes through the broker to the carrier and then back. And we think about that round trip as a circuit. So we see our job is to connect that circuit, establishing connectivity. I think that's a really helpful visual way to picture what it means to drive connectivity between agencies and carriers. I think this means two things, really. One is it means fewer steps and more predictability. So manual reentry and follow-up emails, that is a huge friction point. It's just wasted time. You'd love to have you send the data once and it comes back to you. Carriers that streamline that process and give agents real clarity at every stage are much easier to place business with. And then the second is just end-to-end consistency. There's a lot of standalone digital tools, as you know, as brokers build out their own technology stacks. But brokers really need consistency across the whole workflow, from appetite through submission, receiving the quote, and then obviously ultimately servicing.
When you look at integrated tech solutions like real-time quoting, policy downloads, and automated appetite and eligibility communication, how are they helping carriers become indispensable partners to agencies and MGAs?
If you go back to the original point that you and I started this discussion with, we said carriers want to get close to their distribution partners as possible. And when they do that, they'll attract more of the kind of risk that they want to hold. We think of that in basically three buckets. So we think that the tech stack should accomplish, particularly as it relates to connectivity with brokers and agents, three things. The first is technology should help them source risk. So that means real-time appetite communication, to the first point that we made about the survey. It means quoting that's connected to the agency management system so that the quote can drop directly in the workflow of the agent, and book transfer tools so that carriers can be present where agents are already pricing risk. The second thing that carriers should seek to do with their tech stack as it pertains to agency connectivity is absorb risk. This is an area we've made huge investments in over the last year. We acquired a company called Cytora, which is a digitization tool that helps carriers digitize unstructured risk data from brokers and carriers, put that into downstream systems to drive further automation, and do so in a way that protects their unique view of risk. And we've built tools into the management systems to connect that back to the agent so that the agent can automatically know what data is missing, what do I need to, what other risk factors do I need to share to place this risk, and then to the point around quoting directly in the management system, a place to put the quote directly in the agent's management system. And then the third thing, which is what Ivans has been built on for many, many decades, is service risk. So how do we help keep policy admin systems, agency management systems in sync through our download technology?
Customize your data experience. BestLink now offers an interactive company dashboard that provides company-level intelligence in a fast, user-friendly interface featuring interactive tables, charts, and Sparkline performance histories. Customize the dashboard tiles to prioritize the insurer ratings, data, and analytics that best support your workflow. AM Best. Our insight, your advantage.
Michael, with agencies prioritizing real-time insights over legacy processes, how should insurers rethink distribution strategies, enhance service, and maintain trust and loyalty in a digital-first environment?
I think there's two things that they should do. The first is just to recognize that you have to be where agents are. And I think of this a lot. There's kind of a multi-storefront approach to this. So we know that carriers invest heavily in their portals because that's a great way to get agents into their systems. But carriers also need to be where agents are spending their day to day, which is inside the management system and the submission tools that agents already use. If an agent has to leave their workflow to place risk, that's an unnecessary point of friction that is likely to result in less risk coming the carrier's way. The second thing is to invest in appetite visibility. So anything carriers can do to communicate appetite in real time, be that on comparative rating panels, through our Ask Kodiak tools, or by utilizing book of business visibility to help target the right risk, carriers really need to do, because that's what brokers are looking for from their carrier partners.
How are automation and real-time data exchange transforming underwriting efficiency, along with addressing operational pain points and strengthening carrier-agency relationships?
So friction in the underwriting process, and particularly as it relates to commercial submissions, has been a point of friction in the industry for a very long time. And it's not something that we have not tried to solve. I think the solutions to this problem have historically failed for one of two reasons. The first is that the solutions tend to be very point to point. So one broker and one carrier establish connectivity to send submissions through. It falls down when that broker wants to connect to a different carrier and has to hook into completely new APIs, as an example. The second way it falls down is a lot of these solutions that are trying to drive automation by forcing the risk to adhere to a certain standard view of that risk. And so that forces the carrier to make a trade-off between speed, which they want to achieve for their broker partners, and having a high quality view of that risk that protects their own unique view of that risk. And with the advent of large language models, there's ways to solve this problem now that just were not possible a couple of years ago. And we believe Cytora is one of the examples of a solution that can do that. So the way to think about what Cytora does is it closes the submission gap. So by digitizing the intake, but doing so in such a way that protects the carrier's view of risk, i.e. not forcing that risk to adhere to a standardized view, they can achieve the efficiency benefits without making the trade-off as it relates to risk quality. And when that happens, all of a sudden you can drive massive speed improvements to quote to brokers, faster, and ultimately attract more risk. But not only attract more risk, attract more of the right kind of risk with your own view of what that risk is.
And Michael, looking ahead, what steps can insurers take now to meet rising agency expectations and stay competitive as connectivity demands continue to evolve?
Yeah, I think there's a couple, and it reinforces themes we've discussed throughout this conversation. Carriers need to treat connectivity as core technology investment. Agents are increasingly choosing carriers based on their ease of doing business, and the expectations of agents are rising. And so if carriers don't invest to meet that demand, they're going to fall behind. And then the second way that we would encourage carriers to think about this is to measure the effectiveness of this investment along a couple dimensions. Measure by speed. So how quickly can you get a quote back to your broker partners? Measure by conversion. So obviously how many of those quotes are ultimately converting. But don't forget to also measure by fit. Are you attracting the right kind of risk? And are your investments in speed and conversion reinforcing the portfolio that you're seeking to build?
Michael, this has been such a fascinating and informative discussion, and it's been a pleasure. And I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Lori. It was a pleasure.
That was Michael Streit, president of Ivans. For AM Best Audio, I'm Lori Chortis.
Looking to get the full attention of the insurance industry? We have the platforms that will do just that. Whether it be AM Best TV, AM Best Audio, Best Review Magazine, or Best Day. Find out more by calling AM Best Advertising Sales at 908-439-2200, extension 5399, and have a great day.